The orange warning light on Danielle's dashboard blinks mockingly. She's on empty, her bank account is 0, and she has exactly 11 minutes to pick up her son. Then she sees him, a man slumped against a gas station dumpster, blood blooming across his clothes like wildfire, while others record on their phones or back away, whispering it's too dangerous. Danielle kneels in the oil-stained dirt. She knows intervening means missing her son's pickup and risking her nursing license, but she presses her bare hands against his wounds. Looking into his glazed eyes, she whispers a fierce vow, "I won't let you die." What Danielle didn't know was that this injured stranger was the key to a massive investigation. She didn't realize that by sunrise, a knock at her door would prove that her act of kindness was about to change her life forever. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Sunlight crept through thin curtains in the small apartment kitchen as Danielle Brooks stood at the counter, her fingers tracing over the bold red letters stamped across multiple envelopes. Final notice. Past due. Her shoulders tensed as she added up the numbers in her head, each total higher than the last. The ancient coffee maker sputtered and wheezed, filling the cramped space with its familiar aroma. It was one of the few luxuries she allowed herself. The cheapest brand from the discount store, but still a necessity to fuel her long shifts at the hospital. "Mom!" Isaiah's sleepy voice came from the hallway. "Is there any more cereal?" Danielle quickly shuffled the bills into her purse, plastering on a warm smile. "Good morning, baby. I got your favorite, the ones with the little marshmallows." She reached for the box she'd hidden behind the flour container, saving it as a surprise. Isaiah's eyes lit up as he climbed onto one of the mismatched kitchen chairs. "Really? But those are the expensive ones. They were on sale," Danielle lied smoothly, not mentioning she'd used a coupon and still paid more than she should have. But seeing her son's face light up made it worth every penny. While Isaiah ate, Danielle packed his lunch, a sandwich cut into careful triangles, baby carrots, and the last apple from the bowl. Her own stomach growled, but she ignored it. "Don't forget your math homework," she reminded him, glancing at the papers spread across their small kitchen table. "Did you eat already?" Isaiah asked, his observant eyes catching the way she only sipped her coffee. "Had a big breakfast earlier, baby." Another small lie to protect him. She'd learned to get creative with excuses for skipping meals. Walking Isaiah to school, Danielle held his hand as they passed the apartment manager's office. A new eviction warning had appeared on their door yesterday, their third this year. Isaiah squeezed her hand tighter, and she knew he'd seen it too. "Everything's gonna be fine," she assured him, though her voice wavered slightly. "We always figure it out, don't we?" "I know, Mom." His trust in her was absolute, making her heart ache with both love and worry. At the hospital, Danielle threw herself into her work, moving from patient to patient with careful efficiency. Her colleagues marveled at her energy, not knowing it was fueled by determination rather than food. "Mrs. Martinez needs her pain medication," Dr. Wilson announced during rounds, shaking his head. But her insurance was denied again. Danielle's heart clenched as she watched the elderly woman through the door window, her face tight with discomfort. Mrs. Martinez reminded her of her own grandmother, proud, independent, now struggling alone. Later, during her break, Danielle slipped into the hospital pharmacy. "I'd like to cover Mrs. Martinez's medication," she said quietly to the pharmacist, pulling out her own credit card, the one she'd promised herself she wouldn't use again this month. "Danielle, you can't keep doing this," Sarah, her fellow nurse, warned when she found out. "You're barely making ends meet as it is." "What am I supposed to do?" Watch her suffer? Danielle straightened Mrs. Martinez's blanket, noting how the woman's pain had eased after receiving her medication. Sometimes the right thing costs more than money. The day wore on, and Danielle's energy began to flag. Her scrubs felt heavy, her feet ached, but she kept moving. A scared teenager in the ER needed someone to hold her hand during stitches. A confused elderly man called out for company every time she passed. A young mother needed help understanding her baby's medication instructions. "Brooks, your shift ended 20 minutes ago," the charge nurse called out. Danielle looked up from where she was explaining breathing exercises to an anxious patient. "Just finishing up here," she replied, demonstrating one more deep breath before gathering her things. In the break room, she changed out of her scrubs with trembling hands. Her stomach felt hollow, her head light. The grocery money she'd spent on Mrs. Martinez's medication had been meant to restock her empty kitchen. She thought of Isaiah, thankful she'd at least packed him a good lunch. Checking her gas gauge as she slid into her car, Danielle saw the needle hovering just above empty. The payment from her last shift wouldn't clear until tomorrow. She gripped the steering wheel, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Just make it home." The orange warning light blinked at her mockingly as she pulled out of the hospital parking lot. The streets were quiet this late, most houses dark. Danielle tried to ignore how her hands shook slightly, how her vision blurred at the edges from exhaustion and hunger. One more day. She just had to make it one more day until payday. A billboard advertising fast food taunted her as she waited at a red light. Her mouth watered at the image of hot, salty fries, but she pushed the thought away. Isaiah needed new shoes for school. The rent was due. Mrs. Martinez needed her medication. There would always be something more important than her own comfort. The gas gauge dipped lower as she drove, each mile a prayer that her car would keep running. The numbers in her head kept adding up. Bills, medications, groceries, rent. But she wouldn't change her choices. Every patient she helped, every kind word she offered, every sacrifice she made, it all mattered, even if no one else saw it, even if it left her running on empty. The fluorescent lights of the gas station buzzed weakly in the night air as Danielle guided her car toward the nearest pump. Her hands trembled slightly as she parked, the engine sputtering before falling silent. The digital display on the pump glowed harsh and unforgiving in the darkness. $4.29 per gallon. Danielle opened her worn leather wallet, carefully counting the crumpled bills inside. $23 and some change, barely enough for 5 gallons. She'd meant to save this money for tomorrow's lunch, but without gas, she wouldn't make it home tonight. The station was nearly deserted at this hour. A single cashier dozed behind the counter inside the convenience store, his face lit by the glow of a small television. 2 teenagers loitered near the ice chest, sharing a bag of chips. The air felt heavy with the lingering summer heat, carrying the scent of exhaust and stale coffee. As Danielle inserted her card into the pump, a sharp sound cut through the quiet night. Glass breaking, followed by a muffled cry. She froze, her finger hovering over the keypad. The noise had come from behind the building, near the dumpsters and storage area. Another sound, this time the unmistakable thud of something heavy hitting concrete. The teenagers by the ice chest looked up, then quickly hurried to their car, eager to avoid whatever was happening. Danielle's heart pounded. She should get in her car and leave. Isaiah was waiting at Mrs. Peterson's apartment, and she'd already promised to pick him up by 11. Getting involved in whatever was happening could put her job at risk. Off-duty nurses weren't supposed to provide emergency care without proper authorization. A pained groan echoed from behind the building. "Someone call the police!" a voice shouted. followed by the sound of running footsteps and car doors slamming. Danielle's feet moved before her mind could catch up. She rounded the corner of the building, her nursing instincts taking over. The scene that greeted her made her blood run cold. A man lay crumpled against the wall, blood seeping through his light-colored shirt. 2 other customers stood nearby, phones out, but neither moved to help. A woman in scrubs from another hospital, probably just ending her shift like Danielle, backed away, shaking her head. "We should wait for the ambulance," the woman in scrubs said, her voice trembling. "It could be dangerous. The people who did this might come back." The injured man's chest heaved with labored breaths. Even in the dim light, Danielle could see the pallor of his skin, the way his hands shook as he tried to push himself up. Without intervention, he wouldn't last until the ambulance arrived. Every logical part of her mind screamed to walk away. She thought of Isaiah, waiting at the neighbor's apartment, thought of the hospital administration's strict policies about off-duty care, thought of the dark parking lot and whoever had done this, possibly watching from the shadows. But she couldn't leave him. Danielle dropped to her knees beside the man, her hands already moving to assess his injuries. "Sir, can you hear me? I'm a nurse." Her voice came out steady, professional, despite the fear coursing through her veins. Blood soaked through his shirt from what appeared to be multiple stab wounds. His pupils were dilated, skin clammy. Early signs of shock. She pressed her hands firmly against the worst of the wounds, ignoring the warm blood seeping between her fingers. The man's eyes flickered open, unfocused, and glazed with pain. His lips moved, trying to form words, but only a wet cough emerged. "Don't try to talk," Danielle instructed, keeping pressure on the wound. "Help is coming. Stay with me." She could hear sirens in the distance, but they sounded too far away. The man's breathing grew more labored, his skin taking on a gray tinge. He was slipping. "I need help," Danielle called to the onlookers. "Someone bring me towels. Anything clean to use as bandages." The woman in scrubs hesitated, then hurried into the convenience store. The other bystanders remained frozen, recording with their phones. The man's eyes started to roll back, his body going slack. "No, no, no," Danielle said firmly, shifting to maintain pressure while checking his pulse. "Look at me. Stay with me." His gaze met hers, filled with fear and fading awareness. Danielle leaned closer, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "I won't let you die. You hear me? I won't let you die." The woman in scrubs returned with a stack of paper towels and a first aid kit from the store. Together they worked to slow the bleeding, Danielle directing with quiet authority. The sirens grew louder, but the minutes stretched like hours as Danielle counted each of the man's shallow breaths. Finally, red and blue lights flooded the parking lot. Paramedics rushed around the corner, equipment in hand. Danielle gave them a quick, precise report. Vital signs, observed injuries, level of consciousness. Her training took over, pushing aside her fear and exhaustion. As they loaded the man onto a stretcher, his hand suddenly gripped Danielle's wrist. His eyes were clearer now, intense with an emotion she couldn't read. He tried to speak again, but the paramedics were already moving him toward the ambulance. Danielle watched the ambulance doors close, its lights painting the night in alternating flashes of red and blue. She looked down at her hands, covered in drying blood. Her scrubs were ruined, her knees scraped from kneeling on the concrete. The gravity of what had just happened began to sink in. A police officer approached, notebook in hand. "Ma'am, we'll need to take your statement." Danielle nodded numbly, aware that her quiet night had transformed into something much bigger than herself. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, probably Mrs. Peterson wondering where she was. The gas pump waited, her card still inserted, the tank still empty. but nothing felt the same as it had just minutes ago. The ambulance rocked gently as it sped through the dark streets, sirens wailing. Danielle knelt beside the stretcher, her hands steady as she helped the paramedic monitor vital signs. Even off-duty, her movements were precise, automatic, the result of countless hours in emergency care. BP dropping, the paramedic announced, adjusting an IV line. 70/40. Danielle pressed fresh gauze against one of the wounds that had started seeping again. The man's skin felt cool and clammy under her touch. Despite the chaos around them, she maintained the same calm demeanor she always did with critical patients. "Stay with us," she murmured, though she wasn't sure he could hear her anymore. His face had grown paler during the short ride, features drawn tight with pain, even in semi-consciousness. The ambulance pulled into the emergency bay with a slight jerk. Doors flew open, and suddenly they were moving, rushing through familiar fluorescent-lit corridors. Danielle matched pace with the gurney, still applying pressure, giving rapid-fire details to the receiving team. Multiple stab wounds to the abdomen and chest. Lost consciousness at scene, but responded to painful stimuli. Immediate blood loss, approximately. "Brooks?" Dr. Bott. Sarah Martinez cut in, surprise evident in her voice as she recognized Danielle. "Aren't you off duty?" "Found him at the gas station," Danielle explained quickly, helping transfer the patient to an exam table. "I couldn't just—" "Of course you couldn't," Dr. Martinez said, already focused on assessment. "What's his name?" "I don't—" "Calloway," a deep voice interrupted. A tall man in a dark suit appeared in the doorway, badge visible on his belt. "Ethan Calloway." The energy in the room shifted instantly. Two more suited men appeared, taking positions near the doors. Medical staff exchanged uncertain glances as they worked. Danielle stepped back, letting the trauma team take over, but something made her hesitate to leave. The security presence felt unusual, even for a violent assault victim. The suited men spoke in hushed tones, their expressions grim. Dr. Martinez worked quickly, calling out orders as nurses cut away the blood-soaked clothing. When they removed his shirt, Danielle glimpsed military tattoos on his shoulder. Something about SEALs, though it was hard to make out through the blood and bruising. "Brooks," Dr. Martinez called, gesturing her closer. "A word?" They stepped slightly aside, though Danielle kept her eyes on the patient. The doctor's voice dropped low, meant only for her ears. "That man is an active-duty Navy SEAL," she said quietly. "He's involved in some kind of classified operation. This wasn't a random attack." Danielle's stomach tightened as the implications sank in. She thought of the dark parking lot, the fleeing attackers, the phones recording everything. "Should I be worried?" "Just be aware," Dr. Martinez advised. "They'll want to talk to you. Get your statement." "But Danielle?" She waited until their eyes met. "You did the right thing. He wouldn't have made it without immediate intervention." Before Danielle could respond, there was movement from the exam table. Ethan's eyes had opened, clearer than before. His hand reached out, seeking something. Or someone. Danielle moved closer, drawn by the intensity of his gaze. His fingers caught her wrist, grip surprisingly strong despite his condition. "You," he managed, voice barely above a whisper. "At the station. You didn't walk away." He drew a ragged breath. "Thank you." Then his eyes rolled back, monitors screaming as his blood pressure plummeted. The team rushed into action, pushing Danielle aside as they prepared for emergency surgery. "We need to move now," Dr. Martinez shouted, already steering the gurney toward the OR. Danielle watched them disappear through the double doors, her wrist still warm where Ethan had gripped it. The suited men followed, their urgent whispers echoing in the suddenly quiet room. She looked down at her scrubs, now stiff with dried blood. Her hands trembled slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. The night felt surreal, like something from a movie rather than her ordinary life. A nurse touched her arm gently. "You should go home. Get some rest. We've got him now." Danielle nodded, but her feet felt heavy as she walked to the staff locker room. She changed into spare scrubs, stuffing her ruined ones into a plastic bag. Every movement felt mechanical, distant. The hallways seemed different as she made her way toward the exit. Darker, somehow, despite the harsh overhead lights. She noticed things she usually ignored: security cameras tracking movement, shadows in corners, the way footsteps echoed against sterile floors. Near the entrance, she passed 2 more suited men speaking with hospital security. They paused their conversation to watch her walk by, their expressions unreadable. Danielle kept her pace steady, fighting the urge to hurry. The night air hit her face as she stepped outside, carrying the same humidity as earlier, but nothing else felt the same. The simple act of helping an injured stranger, something she'd done countless times before, had suddenly become complicated, potentially dangerous. She thought of Isaiah, probably asleep now at Mrs. Peterson's apartment. Thought of their quiet life, their careful routines. One decision, one moment of choosing not to walk away, might have changed everything. Her car sat where she'd left it in the employee lot, looking somehow vulnerable under the yellow security lights. Danielle's keys jangled in her shaking hands as she approached it. She couldn't shake the feeling that she'd stepped into something much larger and more serious than a typical emergency room case. The weight of it pressed against her chest as she slid into the driver's seat. She was no longer just a nurse who'd helped an injured man. She was a witness, a participant, a potential target. The key in Danielle's hand trembled as she unlocked her apartment door. The hallway light flickered dimly overhead, casting uneven shadows across the worn carpet. It was nearly 3 a.m. Inside, the small living room was bathed in the blue glow of the television, its volume turned low. Isaiah lay curled up on their second-hand couch, a thin blanket pulled up to his chin. Mrs. Peterson, their elderly neighbor, dozed in the armchair nearby. "I'm so sorry," Danielle whispered, gently touching Mrs. Peterson's shoulder. The older woman startled awake, blinking owlishly. "Oh, Danielle, thank goodness." "I was getting worried." "There was an emergency at the gas station," Danielle explained, keeping her voice low to avoid waking Isaiah. "I had to help someone injured." Mrs. Peterson gathered her cardigan around her shoulders. "Always taking care of everyone else, aren't you? Just like your mother was." Danielle forced a tired smile, walking Mrs. Peterson to the door. She pressed a $20 bill into the woman's hand despite her protests. It was money she couldn't spare, but Mrs. Peterson had stayed hours longer than planned. After locking up, Danielle returned to the living room. Isaiah stirred as she brushed his hair back from his forehead. "Mom," he mumbled, eyes half open. "I'm here, baby. I'm so sorry I'm late." She swallowed the tremor in her voice, not wanting him to sense her unease. "It's okay," he yawned. "Mrs. Peterson made mac and cheese." "That was nice of her." Danielle helped him up, guiding him toward his bedroom. "Let's get you into your real bed." Isaiah climbed under his covers, already drifting back to sleep. "You didn't eat again, did you?" The question caught her off guard. Sometimes she forgot how observant he was, how much he worried about her even at 10 years old. "I'll have something soon," she promised, though her appetite had vanished hours ago. The memory of blood on her hands, of that whispered thank you, had pushed away any thought of food. She kissed his forehead and closed his door softly. In the kitchen, she mechanically went through the motions of making toast, forcing herself to eat a few bites while reviewing tomorrow's schedule. Today's schedule, she corrected herself, glancing at the microwave clock. Her next shift started in less than 5 hours. Sleep proved elusive. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan Calloway's face, heard the urgency in the security team's voices. Around 5:30, she gave up trying and started getting ready for work. Isaiah was still sleeping when she left. Another note tucked into his lunch bag. I love you. Be good for Mrs. Peterson. After school. Mom. The hospital corridors felt different in the harsh morning light. Nurses from night shift avoided her eyes as she passed. Something was off, but exhaustion made it hard to focus on why. Brooks. The sharp voice belonged to Linda Matheson, head of hospital administration. My office! Now! Danielle followed, her scrubs still crisp and new. In the office, she found not just Linda, but also the hospital's legal counsel and her direct supervisor. Sit down, Linda instructed, her tone clipped. Danielle lowered herself into the hard chair, suddenly very aware of her racing heart. We need to discuss last night's incident, Linda began, shuffling through papers on her desk. You intervened in a medical emergency while off duty, without proper authorization or documentation. Someone was dying, Danielle said. I'm a nurse. I couldn't just... You're a nurse when you're on shift, the legal counsel interrupted. Off duty, you're a civilian. Your actions exposed this hospital to significant liability. I followed all emergency protocols, Danielle protested. I stabilized him until paramedics arrived. He would have died otherwise. That's not the point. Linda's glasses flashed under the fluorescent lights. You failed to follow proper channels. You didn't check in with emergency services. You didn't document your initial assessment. And now we have a high-profile patient whose care was first administered by an off-duty nurse in a gas station parking lot. The words hit Danielle like physical blows. I saved his life, and potentially compromised this hospital's legal position in the process. Linda slid a document across the desk. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending a full investigation of the incident. Suspended? The room seemed to tilt sideways. For how long? Until the investigation is complete. Without pay. The words, without pay, echoed in Danielle's head like a death knell. She thought of her empty bank account, the overdue rent notice, Isaiah's growing feet needing new shoes. This isn't right, she managed, her voice hardly more than a whisper. I did everything by the book once we reached the hospital. I gave report. I documented everything. The incident began at the gas station, the legal counsel stated flatly. That's where our concern lies. Please, Danielle said, hating the desperation in her voice. I'm a single mother. I can't afford... This meeting is concluded. Linda's tone left no room for argument. Security will escort you to clean out your locker. Please surrender your ID badge. Danielle's fingers shook as she unpinned her badge. The plastic felt warm from being pressed against her heart all morning, where it had rested through countless patient interactions, through years of service and care. The walk to the locker room stretched endlessly. A security guard hovered nearby as she mechanically emptied her locker. Spare scrubs, comfortable shoes, family photos taped inside the door. Everything went into a cardboard box someone had thrust into her hands. Her co-workers moved around her like ghosts, no one meeting her eyes. The same people who'd worked alongside her for years, who'd shared countless difficult shifts and emotional moments, now turned away as if her situation might be contagious. The box felt impossibly heavy as she carried it toward the exit. Each step took her further from stability, from the certainty of a paycheck, from the ability to care for her son. She'd spent years building this life, careful step by careful step. Now Because she'd chosen to help someone in need, the very essence of her calling, it was crumbling beneath her feet. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh. Danielle stepped out into the morning sunlight, squinting against its brightness. The box in her arms contained the physical pieces of her career, but the weight pressing down on her chest was something far heavier. The realization that doing the right thing might have cost her everything. Danielle sat at her small kitchen table, surrounded by bills and a worn calculator. Morning sunlight streamed through the window, highlighting the dust particles floating in the air. Her fingers moved mechanically over the calculator buttons as she worked the numbers again and again, hoping they'd somehow add up differently. They didn't. Her savings would cover 2 weeks of expenses, maybe 3 if she cut back on everything but absolute necessities. The rent was due in 10 days. Isaiah's growing appetite meant higher grocery bills. And the medication she'd bought for that elderly patient last week had taken a bigger chunk than she'd planned. She rubbed her temples, trying to ward off a headache. Isaiah sat cross-legged on the couch, quietly reading a comic book. He hadn't complained when breakfast was just toast instead of their usual Saturday pancakes. Sometimes his understanding hurt worse than any tantrum would have. "Maybe I could pick up some private nursing shifts," she muttered, scribbling numbers in the margins of an overdue electric bill. But private nursing required current hospital credentials, and her suspension had frozen everything. A sharp knock at the door made them both jump. Isaiah's comic book slipped from his hands. "Stay there, baby," Danielle said, rising slowly. They weren't expecting anyone, and these days, unexpected visitors usually meant bill collectors. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Danielle approached the door cautiously, checking through the peephole. Her breath caught in her throat. The hallway outside was filled with men in naval uniforms. Not just 1 or 2. The narrow space was packed with broad shoulders and serious faces, stretching all the way to the stairwell. "Ms. Brooks?" a deep voice called through the door. "This is Chief Petty Officer Marcus Reynolds with the United States Navy SEALs. We'd like to speak with you, ma'am." Danielle's hand trembled as she undid the chain lock. When she opened the door, she found herself facing a wall of pristine uniforms. 30 men stood at parade rest, their posture respectful, but their presence overwhelming in the confined space. "Mom?" Isaiah had crept up behind her, his eyes wide with wonder at the sight. The man in front, Chief Reynolds, smiled kindly at Isaiah before addressing Danielle. "Ma'am, we apologize for arriving unannounced. We're here about Ethan Calloway." Danielle's heart skipped. "Is he?" "He's stable," Reynolds assured her quickly. "Thanks to you." Another SEAL stepped forward, his name tag reading Martinez. "Ms. Brooks, may we come in? What we need to discuss is somewhat sensitive." Danielle nodded, stepping back. Obviously, all 30 men couldn't fit in her small apartment, but 6 of them entered, while the others remained stationed in the hallway. Isaiah watched them file in with undisguised fascination, especially when one of them winked at him. "Would anyone like coffee?" Danielle offered automatically, her mother's lessons in hospitality kicking in despite her confusion. "No, thank you, ma'am," Reynolds said. "We won't take much of your time. We wanted to personally thank you for what you did for our brother-in-arms." Martinez cleared his throat. "We also need to brief you on some details about the situation. Son," he addressed Isaiah gently, "would you mind giving us a few minutes with your mom?" Isaiah looked to Danielle, who nodded. "Go ahead and read in your room, baby. I'll call you when we're done." Once Isaiah's door clicked shut, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Reynolds's expression grew more serious. "Ms. Brooks, the attack on Ethan wasn't random. He was targeted because of an ongoing operation involving a human trafficking ring operating in this city. Danielle sank into a kitchen chair. Trafficking? Yes, ma'am. Ethan had acquired critical evidence about the organization's structure and key players. That's why they tried to eliminate him. Martinez leaned forward. When you saved his life, you also preserved that evidence. Evidence that could help us free dozens of victims. I didn't know, Danielle whispered. I just saw someone who needed help. That's exactly why we're here, another SEAL spoke up. You didn't know who he was or what was at stake, but you helped anyway. You put yourself at risk for a stranger. Reynolds nodded solemnly. We don't forget people who save our own, Ms. Brooks. Please, she said, call me Danielle. Danielle, Reynolds continued, we know about your suspension. We know the hospital's trying to cover itself legally by punishing you for doing the right thing. She blinked back sudden tears. How did you? We have our ways, Martinez said with a slight smile. More importantly, we have resources. The SEAL community takes care of its own. And right now, that includes you. I don't understand. Reynolds pulled out a business card. This is the contact information for our unit's legal team. They're prepared to assist with your situation at the hospital. And this, he produced another card, is from our family support coordinator. We've established a relief fund to help you and Isaiah while this gets sorted out. Danielle stared at the cards in her hand, her vision blurring. I can't accept. You can, Martinez said firmly. And you will. Because we don't leave our people behind. But I'm not. You are, Reynolds interrupted gently. The moment you knelt beside Ethan and said, I won't let you die, you became part of our extended family. And we protect our family. A soft tap at Isaiah's door made them all look up. The boy poked his head out tentatively. Mom, are you okay? You're crying. Danielle hastily wiped her cheeks. Happy tears, baby. Come here. Isaiah approached carefully, studying the SEALs with a mix of curiosity and concern. Reynolds straightened and offered the boy a crisp salute, which Isaiah returned with delighted surprise. Your mom's a hero, son, Reynolds said. Did you know that? Isaiah nodded solemnly. She's always helping people, even when it's hard. That's right. Martinez stepped forward. And now it's our turn to help her. You're not alone anymore, either of you. Danielle stood there, surrounded by these unexpected allies, these warriors who'd appeared on her doorstep not to demand payment or deliver bad news, but to offer protection and support. She'd spent so long being strong for everyone else. She'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone be strong for her. Danielle stared at the closed door long after the SEALs had left, the business cards still clutched in her trembling hands. The hallway outside her apartment felt strangely empty now, as if all the air had been sucked out with their departure. Mom? Isaiah's voice pulled her from her daze. Are those guys really going to help us? She turned to find her son perched on the edge of the couch, his comic book forgotten on the cushion beside him. His eyes held a mixture of hope and worry that made her heart ache. Come here, baby. She sat next to him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. He snuggled close, something he hadn't done as much lately, trying to act grown up. I think they really are. Good, he said firmly. Because you always help everybody else. Danielle kissed the top of his head, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo. I don't know what to think about all this. It feels strange. Strange how? Like when somebody offers you something that seems too good to be true. She studied the cards in her hand again. The raised navy lettering felt solid and real under her fingers. Isaiah sat up straighter. But they're Navy SEALs, Mom. They're heroes. Heroes don't lie. His simple faith made her smile. You're right about that. The morning drifted into afternoon, and Danielle tried to focus on normal Saturday tasks: laundry, cleaning, helping Isaiah with his weekend homework. But her mind kept wandering back to the surreal visit. At 2 o'clock, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Brooks? This is Amanda Porter from the Naval Special Warfare Family Foundation. Do you have time to meet today?" Within an hour, Danielle found herself sitting in a small coffee shop downtown, facing two professionally dressed women. Amanda Porter was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, while her companion, Sarah Mitchell, was a younger attorney who specialized in medical employment law. "First things first," Amanda said, sliding a folder across the table. "This is the paperwork for the Temporary Assistance Fund. It's designed to cover your basic expenses for the next 3 months." Danielle opened the folder and nearly choked on her coffee when she saw the numbers. "This is— I can't possibly." "You can, and you will," Sarah interrupted firmly, reminding Danielle of the SEAL's earlier insistence. "This isn't charity, Ms. Brooks. It's risk mitigation. You're currently a key civilian witness in an ongoing federal investigation. Ensuring your financial stability is part of maintaining operational security." "But, Mom," Isaiah whispered from beside her. He'd been quietly coloring in the activity book the coffee shop had given him, but now he looked up with serious eyes. "Remember what you told Mrs. Rodriguez when she didn't want to take her medicine because it was too expensive?" Danielle felt her face warm. "That sometimes we need to let others help us so we can keep helping others." Amanda smiled. "Smart boy you've got there." "He is," Danielle agreed softly. She took a deep breath and picked up the pen Sarah offered. Her signature felt strange on the documents, like she was signing away something heavy she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Sarah pulled out another set of papers. "Now, about your situation at the hospital. Their suspension is legally questionable at best. You were acting within the scope of your medical training to save a life. There's established precedent protecting healthcare workers who render emergency assistance." For the next hour, they discussed strategy. Sarah would contact the hospital's legal department first thing Monday morning. Amanda outlined additional support services available. Everything from counseling to childcare if needed. "The community looks after its own," Amanda explained, echoing the SEAL's earlier words. "And right now, that includes you and Isaiah." Danielle felt tears threatening again. "I'm not used to being on this side of things." "We know," Amanda said gently. "That's exactly why you deserve to be." They were just wrapping up when Danielle's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Ethan Calloway is awake and asking for you. Can you come tomorrow morning? Dr. Roberts." Isaiah peered at the message. "Are you going to go see him, Mom?" Danielle nodded slowly. "I think I should. Can I come?" He tried to hide his eagerness, but his eyes lit up at the thought of seeing the SEALs again. "Not this time, baby. But maybe soon." She squeezed his hand. "Let's head home and figure out what we need to do to get ready for tomorrow." The drive home felt different somehow. The same streets she'd traveled thousands of times seemed changed, as if the world had shifted slightly on its axis. The weight of unpaid bills no longer pressed quite so heavily on her shoulders. The uncertainty of her job situation didn't feel quite so terrifying. In their apartment, Isaiah helped her lay out her clothes for the next day. Her best pair of jeans and a soft blue sweater that made her feel confident. She packed her nursing credentials just in case they were needed for hospital access. "What do you think he'll say?" Isaiah asked as they worked together to make dinner. Simple sandwiches, but made with fresh bread they could now afford. "I don't know," Danielle admitted. "I didn't exactly meet him under normal circumstances. But you saved his life." Isaiah stated this as a simple fact, the way children often did. That's better than meeting normal. Danielle smiled, ruffling his hair. When did you get so wise? Later, after Isaiah was in bed, Danielle sat at her kitchen table again. But this time, instead of bills and desperate calculations, she had a notebook where she wrote down questions she wanted to ask tomorrow. The cards from the seals sat nearby, no longer seeming quite so impossible. She touched the hospital ID badge she'd set out for morning. For the first time since her suspension, she felt something more than fear when she looked at it. She felt hope, not just for herself, but for what this strange turn of events might mean for her ability to help others in the future. The bedside clock read 10:47 p.m. In just over 12 hours, she would face the man whose life she'd saved, whose world had somehow collided with hers on that dark night at the gas station. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew one thing. She'd face it with the same courage that had made her run toward danger instead of away from it. The hospital corridors felt different this morning. Instead of her usual scrubs, Danielle wore her carefully chosen blue sweater, her visitor badge clipped to the soft fabric. Two uniformed Navy personnel flanked the entrance to the secure wing, their presence both reassuring and intimidating. "ID, please, ma'am," the taller guard requested. His voice was professional but kind. Danielle handed over her driver's license, watching as they cross-referenced it against a list. The shorter guard spoke into his radio, confirming her arrival. She noticed the way other hospital staff gave the area a wide berth, their curious glances darting between her and the guards. "You're cleared to enter, Ms. Brooks," the taller guard said, returning her ID. "Room 412. The secure wing was eerily quiet compared to the usual bustle of the hospital. Her shoes squeaked softly against the polished floor as she approached room 412. Another guard stood outside, this one in civilian clothes, but with an unmistakable military bearing. He opened the door for her without a word. Danielle took a deep breath and stepped inside. The hospital room was larger than standard, with medical equipment arranged neatly around a bed by the window. Ethan Calloway sat propped up against pillows, looking simultaneously stronger and more vulnerable than he had that night at the gas station. The bruising on his face had deepened to purple, but his eyes were clear and alert. "Nurse Brooks," he said, his voice steady despite the obvious effort it took. "I hoped you'd come. Please, call me Danielle." She moved closer to the bed, her nursing instincts automatically assessing his condition. The monitors showed stable vital signs, good color despite the bruising, proper fluid levels in his IV. "Danielle." He gestured to a chair beside the bed. "I think we need to talk." She sat down, noting how he shifted slightly to face her better, hiding a wince at the movement. "How are you feeling?" "Better than I should be, thanks to you." His eyes held hers. "The doctors said, if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't known exactly what to do—" "I just did what any nurse would do," Danielle started, but Ethan shook his head. "No. What you did wasn't just medical training. You chose to help when others walked away. You put yourself at risk for a stranger." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "And I need you to understand what that risk really means." Danielle felt her stomach tighten. The attack wasn't random. "No." Ethan adjusted his position again, his jaw tightening briefly against pain. "I'm part of a joint task force investigating a human trafficking network, one that involves some very powerful people in this city, people who should have been protecting the vulnerable, not exploiting them." The words hung heavy in the air. Danielle thought of the increased security, the swift arrival of the SEAL team at her home. "They wanted to silence you. They tried." His smile was grim. "They failed because of you. But that means you're involved now. You're a witness to their attempt on my life." That's why there's so much security, Danielle said slowly. Not just for you, but for me too. Ethan nodded. My team takes care of its own. And you became one of ours the moment you said, I won't let you die. His voice softened slightly at the memory. Did you know you kept repeating that? The whole time you were keeping me alive, you just kept saying it, like a promise. Danielle hadn't remembered that detail. The moment came back to her now. The feel of blood on her hands, the desperate pressure she'd maintained, the words that had come from somewhere deep inside her. I meant it, she said simply. I know. Ethan's expression held something like wonder. That's what makes you extraordinary, Danielle. Not just your skills, but your heart. You meant every word. A comfortable silence fell between them. Danielle realized she felt oddly at ease with this man who had gone from stranger to something else. Not quite friend, but someone connected to her by something profound. The team told me about your situation at the hospital, Ethan said finally. The suspension, the financial pressure you were under even before this happened. They've already done more than enough. Danielle started to protest. They've barely started, Ethan interrupted firmly. Listen to me, Danielle. What you did that night, it wasn't just saving my life. You preserved crucial evidence. You protected an ongoing operation that's going to save countless lives. And you did it without knowing any of that. You did it because it was right. He reached for a cup of water, and Danielle automatically helped him with it, adjusting the straw. The simple act of nursing came naturally to her. Even now, the world needs more people like you, he continued after taking a sip. People who don't look away. People who help first and count the cost later. But it's time to let others help you now. I'm not used to that, Danielle admitted. I know, but you're part of something bigger now. His eyes were intense, willing her to understand. My team, we have resources, connections. We can make sure you and your son are protected. We can help you get back to work. Not just back, but somewhere you can really make a difference. Danielle thought of Isaiah's face when he saw the SEALs at their door, how he'd called them heroes. She thought of Amanda Porter and Sarah Mitchell, offering support she'd never dreamed possible. What you're fighting against, she said carefully. These people who hurt others, they're really powerful? Yes. Ethan didn't sugarcoat it. But we're stronger, especially now that we have evidence of their direct action against a federal agent. Because I was there, Danielle said softly, understanding fully for the first time. Because I saw what they did, and I can testify. If you're willing, Ethan confirmed, but whatever you decide, you have our full protection and support. That's not negotiable. A knock at the door signaled the end of their allowed visit time. Danielle stood, smoothing her sweater with slightly trembling hands. Thank you, Ethan said quietly, for everything. I'll come back to check on you, Danielle promised. It wasn't a question. I know you will. His smile was genuine, reflecting a trust that had been earned in blood and courage. Danielle sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the email on her phone. Her hands trembled slightly as she read it again. Dear Ms. Brooks, the suspension of your employment is under administrative review. Please report to Human Resources tomorrow at 9 a.m. The message went on with formal language, but those first lines made her heart race. She'd been certain her nursing career was over, that her choice to help Ethan had cost her everything she'd worked for. Isaiah looked up from his homework, sensing her emotion. Mom? What is it? The hospital. She took a deep breath. They want to review my suspension. Her son's face lit up. Really? That means you might get to go back to work? Maybe, sweetie. Danielle tried to temper her hope with caution. but Isaiah's optimism was infectious. The next morning, Danielle dressed in her best blouse and slacks, the ones she saved for special occasions. The hospital lobby felt different as she walked through it. People nodded to her, some even smiled. Word had spread about what she'd done, about the Navy SEALs' involvement. In the Human Resources office, she found not just the HR director, but also Amanda Porter, one of the SEAL team's representatives, and Dr. Matthews, the chief of emergency medicine. "Ms. Brooks," the HR director began, "we've received some compelling testimony regarding your actions on the night in question." Amanda Porter spoke up, her voice calm but carrying authority. "The United States Navy has made it clear that Nurse Brooks's intervention saved the life of a federal agent during a critical operation. Her actions, while technically outside protocol, demonstrated the highest standards of medical care and moral courage." Dr. Matthews nodded. "We've also reviewed your overall service record, Danielle. Your dedication to patient care is exemplary. The incident with Mr. Calloway wasn't an isolated event. It's consistent with your pattern of going above and beyond for patients." Danielle sat straighter, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've always believed that being a nurse means helping people, whether I'm on duty or not. That dedication is precisely why we're reinstating you, effective immediately," the HR director announced. "There will be a formal review process, but you can return to work while that proceeds." Relief flooded through Danielle. "Thank you," she managed to say. "There's more," Amanda added, pulling out a folder. "The Veterans Support Foundation has taken an interest in your case. They've established a grant to cover your outstanding medical school loans." Danielle blinked, sure she'd misheard. Those loans had been hanging over her for years, forcing her to work double shifts just to make minimum payments. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Dr. Matthews suggested kindly. "You've earned this, Danielle. Your compassion and courage have inspired a lot of people." Walking out of the meeting, Danielle felt lighter than she had in years. Her phone buzzed with a text from Isaiah. "How did it go?" She smiled, typing back, "I'm back at work. Big surprise news when I get home." That evening, Danielle sat with Isaiah on their worn couch, explaining everything. His eyes grew wide when she mentioned the loan forgiveness. "Does this mean you won't have to work so many extra shifts?" he asked hopefully. "That's right, baby." She pulled him close. "I'll be home more. Maybe we can even start saving for a bigger apartment." "Could I join after-school activities?" Isaiah asked tentatively. He'd always understood they couldn't afford the fees before. "We can look into it," Danielle promised, her heart swelling at his careful way of asking. "Maybe that art program you mentioned?" Isaiah's whole face lit up. "Really? Jimmy says they do painting and sculpture." For the first time in years, Danielle let herself imagine possibilities instead of just survival. Maybe they could get a car that didn't break down every month. Maybe Isaiah could have new clothes instead of hand-me-downs. Maybe she could even start a small savings account. The next day at work, everything felt different. Her colleagues welcomed her back warmly, some even apologizing for not speaking up sooner. The same administrator who had suspended her now praised her dedication to patient care in front of others. During her lunch break, Danielle found a quiet moment to call the apartment complex office. "I'd like to set up a payment plan for the back rent," she began. "Oh, Ms. Brooks," the manager sounded surprised. "That's been taken care of. A veterans organization settled the balance yesterday. They also paid through next month." Danielle leaned against the wall, overwhelmed. The SEALs and their network were doing more than just protecting her. They were helping her build a stable life. That evening, she took Isaiah to the grocery store. For once, She didn't have to count every dollar or stick to the absolute basics. When Isaiah asked if they could get fresh strawberries, usually an impossible luxury, she put them in the cart. At home, watching Isaiah arrange his strawberries carefully on a plate, Danielle felt tears prick her eyes. Such a simple thing, being able to say yes to her son's small request. She thought of all the times she'd had to say no, all the ways they'd had to scrimp and save. "Mom?" Isaiah looked concerned. "Are you okay?" "I'm more than okay, baby." She wiped her eyes, smiling. "I'm just happy. Things are getting better for us." "Because you helped that Navy SEAL man?" Isaiah asked, offering her a strawberry. "Partly," Danielle said, accepting the fruit. "But also because sometimes, when you keep doing what's right, good things find their way back to you." Later, after Isaiah was in bed, Danielle stood at their small kitchen window. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and for once, they didn't seem to be mocking her with all the things she couldn't provide. Instead, they looked like possibilities. She touched the window gently, her reflection smiling back at her. "Maybe," she whispered, tasting the unfamiliar flavor of hope. "This is really turning around." 2 days after her reinstatement, Danielle walked through the hospital's sliding doors, her nurse's ID badge once again clipped to her uniform. The morning light streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. A few staff members nodded as she passed, their expressions a mix of respect and lingering uncertainty. At the nurse's station, her old locker key waited in an envelope. Sarah, a fellow nurse she'd worked with for years, handed it to her with a warm smile. "Welcome back, Danielle. We missed you." "Thanks, Sarah." Danielle's fingers closed around the familiar metal key. "It's good to be back." The morning rounds felt both strange and comforting. Her patients' charts were exactly where they should be, the routines unchanged. Yet something had shifted. When she checked on Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly woman who'd been admitted for pneumonia, the patient's eyes lit up with recognition. "You're the nurse from the news," Mrs. Rodriguez said, reaching for Danielle's hand. "The one who saved that soldier?" Danielle adjusted the woman's IV line, maintaining her professional composure. "I just did what any nurse would do." "No, dear." Mrs. Rodriguez shook her head. "Not everyone would have stopped. My grandson, he works at that gas station. He told me how it happened." Throughout the morning, similar moments repeated. Patients and their families mentioned the incident, some offering quiet thanks, others sharing their own stories of times when someone had stepped up to help them. The attention made Danielle uncomfortable, but she handled it with grace. During her lunch break, she received a call from the hospital's public relations department. They wanted to feature her in their monthly newsletter, highlighting her dedication to patient care. The old Danielle would have declined, but she thought of Isaiah and how proud he'd been seeing his mother recognized for doing good. "Yes," she said, surprising herself. "I'll do the interview." Later that afternoon, she visited Ethan's room during her rounds. His recovery was progressing well, the color returning to his face. 2 guards still stood outside his door, but they knew her now, greeting her with respectful nods. "Nurse Brooks," Ethan said, sitting up straighter in his bed. "Good to see you back in uniform." "How's the pain today?" she asked, checking his vitals. "Manageable." He watched her work with steady eyes. "The investigation's moving forward. Your statement helped connect some important dots." Danielle recorded his blood pressure, keeping her voice low. "The other nurses say there have been more federal agents around the hospital." "They're cleaning house," Ethan confirmed. "Several arrests already, all quiet. High-level people involved in the trafficking ring." The knowledge that her actions had contributed to something larger than herself filled Danielle with a quiet sense of purpose. She'd not only saved a life, but helped set in motion events that would save many others. After her shift, Danielle stopped by the hospital's accounting office. The Veterans Support Foundation had indeed cleared her outstanding medical school loans. The amount made her dizzy. Years of debt vanished in a single transaction. We've also received notification about your continuing education credits, the accountant mentioned, shuffling through papers. They're covered for the next 2 years. Driving home, Danielle allowed herself to fully process everything. Her job was secure. Her debts were cleared. The investigation was progressing. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the crushing weight of financial pressure. At the grocery store, she bought ingredients for Isaiah's favorite meal: homemade mac and cheese with real cheese. Not the powdered kind they usually had to settle for. She added fresh vegetables to the cart without checking prices, still marveling at this new freedom. The apartment felt different when she returned. The tension that had lived in its walls seemed to have dissipated. Isaiah sat at the kitchen table, focused on his homework, but looked up with a bright smile when she entered. "Mom, how was work?" "Good, baby." She set the groceries down and kissed the top of his head. "Really good. Want to help me make dinner?" They worked together in the kitchen, Isaiah carefully grating cheese while Danielle boiled the pasta. The simple domestic scene felt precious after everything they'd been through. "My teacher asked about you today," Isaiah mentioned, measuring milk for the sauce. "She saw the article about what you did." "What did you tell her?" "I said you're a hero." He stirred the milk carefully. "But I already knew that before." Danielle had to turn away for a moment, blinking back tears. When she'd made that split-second decision at the gas station, she'd never imagined it would lead to this. Not just safety and stability, but a chance for her son to feel proud of their family's legacy. After dinner, they sat on the couch together, watching a movie, a small luxury they'd rarely had time for before. Isaiah leaned against her, content and sleepy. The evening news played quietly in the background, mentioning arrests of several prominent local officials, though no names were released. "Time for bed, sweetheart," Danielle said when the movie ended. In his room, Isaiah climbed into bed while Danielle pulled up his covers. The streetlight outside cast a gentle glow through his window, and for once, the neighborhood sounds seemed peaceful rather than threatening. "Mom?" Isaiah asked as she smoothed his blanket. "Are we going to be okay now?" Danielle sat on the edge of his bed, looking at her son's hopeful face. In that moment, she felt the full weight of how far they'd come. The constant worry about money, the endless double shifts, the impossible choices between necessities, all of it was easing. "Yes, baby," she said, and for the first time in years, she truly believed it. "We're going to be more than okay." She tucked the blanket around him, making sure his favorite stuffed bear was within reach. The room was warm and safe, filled with the quiet certainty that tomorrow would be better than yesterday. "I love you, Mom," Isaiah murmured, already drifting off. "I love you too, sweetheart." Danielle kissed his forehead, breathing in the moment. Sweet dreams. The fluorescent lights of the hospital parking garage cast harsh shadows as Danielle walked to her car. Her feet ached from the 12-hour shift, and she longed for the comfort of home. The night air held an unusual chill for the season, making her pull her thin jacket closer. As she drove through the quiet streets, her mind wandered to the day's small victories. Mrs. Peterson had finally been discharged after weeks of recovery. 2 new nurses had asked for her guidance during a difficult procedure. Even Dr. Morgan had commented on her exceptional patient care. Turning onto her street, Danielle noticed something was wrong before she even reached her building. The porch light she always left on was dark. Her heart began to race as she parked, noticing their apartment door slightly ajar. The frame splintered around the lock. "Isaiah!" she called out, panic rising in her throat. Then she remembered. He was at his friend Tommy's house for a sleepover. Thank God. Danielle's hands trembled as she pushed the door open. The hinges creaked, revealing devastation inside. Her breath caught in her throat. The small living room she'd worked so hard to make comfortable was destroyed. The second-hand couch had been slashed, its stuffing scattered across the floor. Picture frames lay shattered, family photos torn and strewn about. In the kitchen, dishes lay broken on the linoleum. Cabinet doors hung open, their contents dumped. The refrigerator door stood open, food spoiled and dripping. But what made her blood run cold was the message sprayed across the wall in angry red paint. "You should have walked away." Danielle backed out of the apartment, fumbling for her phone with shaking hands. She called 911 first, then the number the SEAL team had given her for emergencies. While waiting for help, she sat in her car, doors locked, watching her building with frightened eyes. The police arrived first, 2 officers who took photographs and notes, but offered little comfort. "Probably just kids," one suggested, despite the obvious, targeted nature of the attack. They gave her a case number, told her to call if she noticed anything missing. An hour later, 2 men in plain clothes arrived, security contractors connected to the SEAL team. They were more thorough, checking for surveillance devices and taking detailed photos of the message. They spoke in low, serious tones about escalation and protective measures. "We'll have someone watching the building tonight," one assured her. "You should stay somewhere else until we can secure the apartment." But Danielle had nowhere else to go. No family nearby, no close friends with spare rooms. She spent the night in a cheap motel, unable to sleep, jumping at every sound. The image of her violated home played on repeat in her mind. Morning came with harsh fluorescent light through thin curtains. Danielle's phone buzzed, a message from hospital administration requesting an immediate meeting. Her stomach knotted as she dressed in yesterday's wrinkled scrubs. The hospital's administrative wing felt colder than usual. Sharon Myers, the chief of nursing, sat behind her desk with a carefully neutral expression. The hospital's legal counsel stood nearby, arms crossed. "Danielle," Sharon began, not meeting her eyes, "we've received concerning information about security risks associated with your involvement in the Calloway case." "I was just doing my job," Danielle protested weakly. "Your actions, while admirable, have created liability issues for the hospital." The lawyer stepped forward, sliding a document across the desk. "We're terminating your employment, effective immediately." "But I haven't done anything wrong," Danielle's voice cracked. "I saved someone's life." "This isn't about right or wrong," Sharon said softly. "It's about protecting the hospital and our patients. We can't have potential criminal elements targeting our staff." Danielle read the termination letter through blurring tears. 2 weeks severance pay. Immediate surrender of her ID badge. No references for future employment. Walking out of the hospital felt surreal. Security escorted her to clean out her locker, past co-workers who quickly looked away. The box of personal items felt impossibly heavy in her arms. Her phone rang as she reached her car, one of the federal agents involved in the case. "The judge released Marcus Thompson this morning," he said without preamble. "Key evidence was ruled inadmissible." "I'm sorry, Danielle. We're not giving up, but—" She barely heard the rest. Thompson was the suspected ringleader, the one Ethan had been investigating, the one whose operation she had unknowingly helped disrupt. And now he was free. The drive to Tommy's house to pick up Isaiah felt endless. Each car in her rearview mirror looked threatening. Every stopped moment at traffic lights left her exposed. The morning's bright sunshine felt like a cruel joke. Isaiah ran to her when she arrived, full of stories about his sleepover. His smile faded as he saw her face. "Mom, what's wrong?" Danielle tried to keep her voice steady. "We need to go somewhere safe for a little while, baby." Back at the motel, Isaiah sat quiet and small on the bed while Danielle made calls. The SEAL team's protection felt suddenly inadequate. The financial assistance that had seemed so miraculous now wouldn't cover both a new apartment and basic necessities. Every solution crumbled as soon as she reached for it. Isaiah's small voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "Are the bad people coming after us because you helped that man?" Danielle crossed the room in 2 steps, pulling him into her arms. He felt so fragile against her chest, this precious child she'd promised to protect. Tears she'd been holding back all day finally spilled over. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered into his hair. "I'm so sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. I never meant to put you in danger." Isaiah's arms tightened around her. "You did do the right thing, Mom. You always do." But as she held him in that shabby motel room, surrounded by the ruins of their security, Danielle wondered if doing the right thing was a luxury she could no longer afford. Morning sunlight filtered through the thin motel curtains, casting weak shadows across scattered papers on the small table. Danielle sat motionless, staring at the red letters stamped across their apartment's eviction notice. 3 days to vacate. The words blurred as her tired eyes struggled to focus. Isaiah slept on the sagging motel bed, his breathing steady and peaceful. She envied his ability to find rest amid chaos. Dark circles shadowed his young face, evidence of their rushed midnight move after the break-in. A box of his favorite cereal sat unopened beside him, a small attempt at normalcy she couldn't quite manage to provide. Her phone vibrated against the table. Another unknown number. Lately, every call brought more bad news. Her finger hovered over the ignore button before duty won out. "Ms. Brooks?" A woman's voice, professional but gentle. "This is Agent Sarah Marshall, with the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force." Danielle's throat tightened. "Yes? We need to meet. It's about the Thompson case." An hour later, Danielle sat in a small conference room at the local FBI field office. The walls were bare, except for a large map marked with colored pins. Agent Marshall sat across from her, a thick file folder between them. Another agent, introduced as Cooper, stood by the window. "We're building a case against Thompson's entire network," Marshall explained. "But we need witnesses willing to testify in open court." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Danielle processed the words. "Open court? You mean publicly?" "Yes. Your testimony about the night you saved Agent Calloway would establish a crucial timeline. It would help prove Thompson's involvement in the attempted murder of a federal agent." Danielle's hands clenched in her lap. "But everyone would know who I am. They already vandalized my home. What else would they do?" "We understand your concerns," Cooper said, turning from the window. "We can offer witness protection, relocation if necessary." "Relocation?" The word hit like a physical blow. "You mean leave everything behind? Isaiah's school, his friends, our whole life?" "It would be temporary," Marshall assured her, "just until the trial concludes and the danger passes." Danielle stood abruptly, pacing the small room. Her mind raced through implications. New names, new city, new everything. Isaiah would have to start over, carrying a secret he was too young to fully understand. And for what? The chance that Thompson might go to prison? "What if I say no?" Her voice came out smaller than intended. The agents exchanged glances. Without witness testimony, the case weakens significantly. Thompson could walk free permanently and continue trafficking innocent people, Cooper added quietly. Danielle sank back into her chair, the weight of responsibility crushing down. She thought of her hospital patients. How many had been trafficking victims themselves? How many more would suffer if Thompson remained free? But Isaiah's face floated in her mind, scared, confused, asking why they had to leave their home. "I need time to think," she managed. Back at the motel, Isaiah was awake and watching cartoons. The sight of him, so innocent and vulnerable, sent fresh waves of guilt through her. Had her compassion that night at the gas station endangered everything she held dear? "Mom?" Isaiah muted the TV. "Are you okay?" Danielle tried to smile. "Just tired, baby." "Was it about the bad people again?" She sat beside him, pulling him close. "Sort of. The police want my help to catch them." Isaiah looked up at her with those wise beyond his years eyes. "But it's dangerous?" "Yes." No point lying to him. He'd seen too much already. "Like when you helped that hurt man? Even though it was scary?" Danielle's breath caught. The memory of that night felt distant now. The blood on her hands, the fierce certainty that she couldn't walk away. "That's different. This time, it affects you too. But you always say doing the right thing is important, even when it's hard." Tears threatened to spill. When had her little boy grown so insightful? Sometimes being a mom means making hard choices to keep you safe. "I know you're scared," Isaiah said, his small hand finding hers. "I get scared too. But you're the bravest person I know." Danielle stared at their joined hands, his tiny fingers wrapped trustingly around hers. The same hands that had once cradled him as a newborn, that had worked countless hospital shifts to provide for him, that had pressed against a stranger's wounds because she couldn't bear to let someone die. Her whole life had been about protecting people. Her patients, her son, even strangers in need. But now, facing the biggest threat they'd ever encountered, she felt paralyzed by fear. The weight of choice pressed down like a physical thing. Walking away would be easier. They could move somewhere quiet, start fresh. Isaiah would be safe. But would he be proud of the example she set? Would she recognize herself in the mirror, knowing she'd chosen safety over justice? The eviction notice caught her eye, red letters stark against white paper. In 3 days, they'd have nowhere to call home anyway. Everything familiar was already slipping away, whether she testified or not. Isaiah's cartoon played silently on the TV, some hero facing impossible odds to help others. Her son watched with rapt attention, believing in good triumphing over evil, believing in her. Danielle looked at him, really looked at the child she'd raised alone, who somehow understood right from wrong better than many adults. He wasn't just something to protect anymore. He was watching, learning, forming his own moral compass based on her examples. The choice crystallized with stunning clarity. She couldn't teach him to be brave by giving in to fear, couldn't show him the importance of helping others by walking away when it got difficult. The world Thompson represented would still exist, would still threaten children like Isaiah, unless someone stood against it. Her phone sat heavy in her pocket, Agent Marshall's card beside it. One call would set everything in motion: testimony, protection, upheaval. But looking at Isaiah's trusting face, Danielle finally understood which path she had to choose. That afternoon, clouds gathered outside the secure safe house, where Danielle waited in a modest conference room. The wall clock ticked steadily, marking each moment of uncertainty. She traced her finger along the smooth wooden table, her mind still replaying Isaiah's words from earlier. The door opened, and Ethan Calloway entered, moving carefully but steadily. Though still bearing visible injuries, his presence carried quiet strength. Behind him, 4 other SEALs filed in, including Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reed, their team leader. They took seats around the table with practiced efficiency. "Thank you for coming, Danielle," Ethan said, his voice carrying the same calm she remembered from the hospital. "We heard about the FBI's request." Danielle straightened in her chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "They want me to testify publicly, to put my name out there." "We know it's a lot to ask," Reed interjected, his weathered face serious. "Especially after what happened to your home." "Isaiah and I are already living in a motel," Danielle said, the words tasting bitter. "We have nowhere else to go anyway." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his movements measured. "That night at the gas station, you could have walked away. Nobody would have blamed you. But you didn't." "That was different," Danielle protested. "It was just me then. Now, Isaiah." "We'll have the full protection of our team," Reed completed firmly. "Plus, federal marshals, FBI security details. We protect our own, Danielle. And you became one of ours the moment you saved Ethan." One of the other SEALs, Peterson, opened a laptop and turned it toward her. "We've already secured multiple safe locations, different cities, complete identity protection protocols. You and Isaiah would have round-the-clock security until the trial ends." Danielle studied the screen, showing various properties, all far from here, all anonymous. "How long would we have to hide?" 3 months at most, Ethan answered. "The prosecution is ready. They just need your testimony to complete the timeline." Another SEAL, Wilson, spoke up. "We understand if you say no. Thompson's organization has hurt a lot of people. The threat is real, but so is the chance to stop them," added Martinez, the 4th team member. "Your testimony could save countless lives, kids who might end up like the victims we've rescued." Danielle closed her eyes, remembering faces from her ER shifts. Young girls with vacant stares, boys with defensive wounds. How many had been Thompson's victims? How many more would there be if she walked away now? "I'm not trying to pressure you," Ethan said softly, "but I saw your courage firsthand. When everyone else stayed back, you ran forward. That's who you are, Danielle. Someone who helps, no matter the cost." She opened her eyes, meeting his steady gaze. "And look where it got me. Unemployed, evicted, hiding in a motel with my son." "No," Reed countered. "Look where it really got you. You saved a life, preserved crucial evidence, gave us a chance to bring down an entire trafficking network. Your compassion didn't just help one person, it created a ripple effect that could save hundreds." Peterson pulled up another screen. "We've tracked Thompson's operation across 5 states. Conservative estimates suggest he's trafficked over 300 victims in the past year alone, mostly minors." The numbers hit Danielle like physical blows. 300 lives destroyed. 300 families shattered. How many of them had children Isaiah's age? "The choice is yours," Ethan said. "But remember who you are. The woman who looked me in the eye when I was bleeding out and promised not to let me die. The nurse who gives away her lunch to homeless patients. The mother who shows her son every day what real courage looks like." Danielle's hands unclenched slowly. "Isaiah said something similar this morning. About doing the right thing even when it's hard." "Smart kid," Martinez smiled. "Sounds like he knows his mom pretty well." Wilson slid a folder across the table. "This is the witness statement the FBI prepared. Take time to read it carefully. But know that if you sign it, you're not alone. We'll be with you every step of the way." Danielle opened the folder scanning the detailed account of that night. The clinical language couldn't capture the fear, the uncertainty, the split-second choice to help instead of hide. But it could help ensure justice. She thought of Isaiah watching his cartoons, believing in heroes who stood up to evil. Thought of her patients, vulnerable and scared, needing someone to fight for them. Thought of herself, who she truly was beneath the fear and exhaustion. "If we do this," she said slowly, "I need to know Isaiah will be safe. Really safe." "You have my word," Reed declared. "Every member of this team considers protecting you and Isaiah our highest priority. We don't leave anyone behind." The others nodded firmly, their commitment evident in their posture, their expressions, their unwavering attention. Ethan pushed a pen toward her. "Whatever you choose, you've already proven your courage. But if you decide to see this through, we've got your back." Danielle picked up the pen, its weight familiar like the medical instruments she'd wielded countless times. How many lives had she saved in the ER? How many more could she save now? The statement sat before her, waiting for her signature. In her mind, she saw Isaiah's trust, heard his words about doing what's right. She thought of all the children Thompson had hurt, would continue to hurt unless someone stopped him. Her hand moved steadily across the page, signing her name with clear, firm strokes. No hesitation, no trembling. The fear that had gripped her since the break-in melted away, replaced by iron resolve. Looking up, she met the eyes of each seal in turn, ending with Ethan. "Let's finish this," she said. "Let's make sure Thompson can't hurt anyone else." The tension in the room shifted, replaced by quiet determination. These men who had seen the worst of humanity now witnessed one woman's decision to stand against it, not despite her fear, but because of what mattered more than fear: justice, protection, and the simple truth that some things were worth fighting for. The marble columns of the federal courthouse loomed over Danielle as two U.S. Marshals escorted her through a private entrance. Her navy blue blazer, borrowed from a kind prosecutor, felt stiff against her shoulders. The early morning corridors echoed with her footsteps, each click of her sensible shoes marking another step toward what scared her most, and what she knew she had to do. In a small witness preparation room, Danielle sat straight-backed, reviewing her statement one final time. Her hands didn't shake anymore, though her heart still raced. Through the window, she caught glimpses of media vans gathering outside. Someone had leaked details of today's testimony. A gentle knock preceded Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Matthews's entrance. "How are you holding up?" "Ready to get this done," Danielle replied, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from her skirt. "Remember, Thompson's lawyers will try to rattle you. They'll question your credibility, suggest you're seeking attention or financial gain." Matthews adjusted her glasses. "Just stay focused on the truth." Danielle nodded. "I know what I saw, what I did. Thompson himself will be there. He'll likely try to intimidate you with his presence." "He doesn't scare me," Danielle said, surprising herself with how true it felt. "Not anymore." The door opened again as Reed entered, now wearing a crisp suit instead of his usual tactical gear. "Courtrooms being secured. Teams in position." He turned to Danielle. "Ethan's already inside. Says he wouldn't miss this for anything." A court officer appeared at the door. "They're ready for you, Ms. Brooks." Danielle stood, squared her shoulders, and followed the officer through the winding hallways. The main courtroom doors opened, revealing rows of spectators, press, and legal teams. At the defense table sat James Thompson, younger than she'd expected. Expensive suit, failing to hide the coldness in his eyes. As she moved toward the witness stand, Danielle caught sight of Ethan in the gallery, surrounded by his team members in civilian clothes. Their presence steadied her. The bailiff approached with a Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" "I do." Her voice carried clearly through the hushed room. Matthews approached first, establishing the basics. "Please state your name for the record." "Danielle Brooks." "And your occupation?" A flicker of pain. "Until recently, I was an emergency room nurse at City General Hospital." "Can you tell us about the night of April 15th? Danielle described stopping for gas after her shift, hearing the struggle, finding Ethan. As she spoke, Thompson's lead attorney, Maxwell Davidson, scribbled notes aggressively, his expensive pen scratching audibly. "Why did you choose to help?" Matthews asked. "Because someone needed help. That's all there was to it. Even though it put you at risk? I'm a nurse. Helping people in crisis is what I do." Davidson stood for cross-examination, straightening his tie with manicured fingers. "Ms. Brooks, isn't it true you were suspended from your position for violating hospital protocols?" "Objection," Matthews called. "Relevance? Goes to credibility, Your Honor. I'll allow it. Witness may answer." Danielle met Davidson's gaze steadily. "Yes, I was suspended for helping someone while off duty. I'd do it again." "Convenient that you helped a Navy SEAL, isn't it? Someone with connections and resources?" "I didn't know who he was. He was just someone bleeding, someone who needed help." Davidson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And now you're receiving protection and support from these same military connections. Quite a fortunate turn of events." "Fortunate?" Danielle's voice sharpened. "I lost my job. My home was vandalized. My son and I are living in hiding. I didn't help Mr. Calloway for rewards. I helped because it was right. You expect us to believe. I expect you to understand that some people still choose to do what's right, even when it costs them everything." Danielle's words rang through the courtroom. "I've spent my career helping people who couldn't pay me back. Ask anyone at City General about the lunches I gave away, the medication costs I covered. I didn't do those things for gain. I did them because that's who I am." Davidson shifted tactics. "The night in question was dark. You were exhausted after a long shift. Isn't it possible you misidentified Mr. Thompson's associates?" "No. I saw them clearly under the station lights. The same men who later vandalized my apartment. The same ones who threatened my son." In the gallery, Thompson's jaw tightened. His attorney tried another angle. "You claim to have heard specific conversations while treating Mr. Calloway. How could you focus on words while handling a medical emergency?" "In the ER, we learned to track everything. Patient vitals, team communications, environmental threats. Those men were discussing their shipment being delayed, how some merchandise needed to be moved. I remember because it seemed wrong. People shouldn't be talked about like cargo." Davidson's confidence wavered slightly. "But you can't be certain." "I am certain, just like I'm certain about the phone calls I overheard them making, the names they mentioned, the locations they discussed." Danielle's voice remained steady as she detailed everything she'd witnessed, each word another brick in the wall of evidence against Thompson's organization. The defense attorney glanced at his client, who had grown increasingly pale. They hadn't expected this level of detail, this unwavering certainty. "No further questions," Davidson muttered, returning to his seat. Matthews stood for redirect. "Ms. Brooks, knowing what you know now, the danger, the consequences, would you make the same choice again?" Danielle looked directly at Thompson, seeing not a powerful criminal, but simply another person who had chosen darkness over light. "Yes, every time." Because the moment we stop helping people in need is the moment we lose who we are. Nothing further, Your Honor. The judge nodded. The witness may step down. Danielle rose, her steps firm as she left the stand. As she passed the gallery, she met Ethan's gaze. His slight nod carried volumes. Respect, gratitude, recognition of courage matched. She had done more than testify. She had shown that one person's choice to help, to stand firm, to speak truth, could help bring down an empire built on others' pain. The marshals fell into step beside her as she exited the courtroom, her purpose fulfilled, her spirit unbroken. Sunlight streamed through the small window of the temporary apartment where Danielle and Isaiah had spent the last 3 weeks. The space was modest but secure, provided by a veterans support network that had rallied around them. White walls and basic furnishings reminded Danielle of her first apartment after nursing school. Simple, but safe. Isaiah sat at the kitchen table, working on his math homework. He'd adapted to their new situation with remarkable resilience, though Danielle noticed how he still checked the locks twice before bed each night. The sound of his pencil scratching against paper filled the quiet morning. A knock at the door made them both freeze, an instinct they'd developed since the threats began. But Danielle relaxed when she heard Reed's familiar voice through the door. "It's us, Danielle. Got the whole team here." After checking the peephole, Danielle opened the door to find Reed, Ethan, now walking with just a slight limp, and several other SEALs she'd come to know during their protection detail. They filed in respectfully, their usual military bearing softened by genuine warmth. "Sorry to crowd your space," Ethan said, noting how the apartment barely contained them all. "But we wanted to do this in person." Isaiah abandoned his homework, moving to stand beside his mother. Over the weeks, he'd grown comfortable with these men who'd become like uncles to him, teaching him chess and helping with his science projects. "Do what?" Danielle asked, noting the folder Reed carried and the barely contained excitement in their expressions. "Show you this." Reed spread architectural drawings across the kitchen table, carefully moving Isaiah's math worksheets aside. "Remember that abandoned medical center on Oak Street?" Danielle nodded. She'd passed it countless times on her way to work. A solid building gone to waste in an area that desperately needed healthcare services. "Well," Ethan continued, "after your testimony helped bring down Thompson's operation, we got talking with some people. Other veterans groups, medical foundations, private donors who were moved by your story." Reed pointed to the plans. "They're going to renovate it completely. State-of-the-art facilities, but with a mission focused on serving people who usually fall through the cracks of the healthcare system." "That's wonderful," Danielle said sincerely, though confused about why they were showing her this. Ethan exchanged glances with his teammates before continuing. "The thing is, they want to name it after you. The Danielle Brooks Community Health Center." Danielle's hand flew to her mouth. "What?" "But that's not all," Reed added quickly. "They want you to run it." Isaiah grabbed his mother's arm excitedly. "Mom, that's amazing!" Danielle sank into a chair, overwhelmed. I don't understand. I'm just a nurse." "You're not just anything," Ethan said firmly. "You're someone who risked everything to help others, who stood up against intimidation to protect people you'd never met. That's exactly the kind of person who should be leading a place like this." Reed laid out more documents. "The funding's secured. You'll have full autonomy to build your team, set priorities. The focus will be on providing care to underserved families, trafficking survivors, veterans, people who need someone in their corner." "But I've never run anything like this," Danielle protested weakly. "You've got support," another SEAL chimed in. "Medical administrators willing to mentor you, foundations ready to provide resources. All you need to do is bring your heart, the same heart that made you stop that night when everyone else walked away? Isaiah tugged at her sleeve. You always said you wished you could help more people, Mom. Now you can. Danielle looked at her son's shining face, then back at the plans. The building would have 20 examination rooms, a mental health wing, a physical therapy center, and a community education space. It was everything she'd ever dreamed of providing for her community. Can we see it? She asked hesitantly. An hour later, Danielle stood before the old medical center, Isaiah's hand in hers. Construction equipment already surrounded the building, and workers were clearing debris from the first floor. The brick facade was solid beneath its layer of grime, like hope waiting to be uncovered. A construction foreman approached with another set of plans, explaining the renovation timeline. The first phase would take 6 months, allowing the primary care wing to open while work continued on specialty areas. Danielle listened, her mind racing with possibilities. She could hire nurses like herself, dedicated people who needed a chance to serve without burning out. They could create programs for preventive care, health education, addiction recovery. The conference room upstairs will be your office, Reed mentioned, pointing to a corner window. Good sight lines, secure access, but still connected to everything happening below. Danielle walked the perimeter of the building, taking in its size, its potential. Through broken windows, she could see the bones of a place that could truly help people. Not just with medical care, but with dignity, with understanding, with the kind of compassion that had defined her own practice. Isaiah ran ahead, excitedly pointing out spaces that could become children's waiting areas, teen counseling rooms, places where families could heal together. His enthusiasm was contagious, breaking through Danielle's lingering disbelief. "This is really happening?" she asked softly, more to herself than anyone else. Ethan appeared beside her. "You gave me a second chance that night. Let us give you one too. A chance to do what you've always done, just on a bigger scale." Danielle touched the building's worn bricks, feeling their solidity beneath her fingers. A month ago, she'd been counting coins for gas, skipping meals to make rent. Now she stood on the cusp of something transformative, not just for her and Isaiah, but for an entire community. Workers began removing the old signage above the entrance, the metal groaning as it gave way. Soon, new letters would take its place, marking not just a building, but a promise. That kindness had power, that courage brought change, that one person's choice to help could ripple outward in ways they never imagined. 6 months had transformed the abandoned medical center into something beautiful. Morning sunlight streamed through spotless windows, warming the Brooks Community Care Clinic's welcoming area. The space hummed with purposeful energy as staff prepared for opening day. Danielle stood in the lobby, smoothing her new white coat with its embroidered clinic logo. The waiting area featured comfortable chairs in soft blues and greens, with local artists' work adorning freshly painted walls. A children's corner held books and quiet toys. Everything had been designed to say, "You matter here." "Mom, the first patients are arriving in 15 minutes, Isaiah called from behind the reception desk. At 10 years old, he'd insisted on helping before school, proud to wear his junior volunteer badge. He sat straighter in his chair, organizing intake forms with careful precision. "Thanks, sweetheart." Danielle smiled, watching him work. These past months had changed him too. Gone was the worried look that had haunted his eyes during their hardest times. Now he walked with confidence, surrounded by positive role models and purpose. The clinic's staff gathered for a final morning meeting. Many were nurses Danielle had specifically recruited. People with heart who needed a chance to practice medicine the right way. Some had left lucrative positions at private hospitals, drawn by the clinic's mission. Others were new graduates, eager to serve their community. "Remember why we're here," Danielle addressed them, her voice steady and warm. "Every person who walks through those doors deserves dignity, respect, and the best care we can provide. We don't turn anyone away. We don't judge. We help." The team nodded, understanding perfectly. They'd all been chosen not just for their skills, but for their compassion. Each had their own story of why they'd joined this mission. At precisely 8 a.m., Isaiah unlocked the front doors. Within minutes, the waiting room began to fill. A mother with 3 children, an elderly man struggling with his walker, a teenager who couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Each was greeted by name, treated with genuine warmth. Danielle moved through the clinic, making sure everything ran smoothly. The primary care wing hummed with activity. In the mental health department, counselors prepared for their first sessions. The physical therapy room gleamed with new equipment, while the community education space was set up for afternoon health classes. Through a window, she spotted familiar faces. Several Navy SEALs had shown up to support the opening, though they stayed discreetly in the background. Ethan stood among them, fully recovered now. He caught her eye and gave a simple nod. Their connection remained one of mutual respect and shared purpose. Mid-morning brought a rush of patients. Isaiah handled the flow with remarkable poise, helping people with paperwork, offering water, making sure children had books to read while they waited. Danielle's heart swelled watching him. He'd found his own way to care for others. The clinic's sliding doors opened again, admitting a woman clutching a baby. Something in her desperate expression made Danielle pause. The infant's breathing seemed labored, and fear radiated from the mother's entire being. "Please," the woman whispered, her voice breaking. "My baby's been sick for days. I didn't know where else to go. We don't have insurance." Before she could finish, Danielle was already moving toward her. She recognized that look, the one that said this was their last hope. How many times had she seen it in the ER, usually after people had already been turned away elsewhere? "You're in the right place," Danielle said gently, guiding them to an exam room. The baby's skin had a slight bluish tinge that set off immediate alarm bells in her mind. She called for oxygen and emergency supplies, her voice calm but carrying the authority that made people move quickly. The mother trembled. "I can't pay." "That's not what matters right now," Danielle interrupted softly, already checking the baby's vital signs. She'd seen enough cases to recognize respiratory syncytial virus, dangerous but treatable if caught in time. "What matters is getting your little one breathing easier." As she worked, Danielle maintained a steady stream of gentle conversation, explaining each step to the frightened mother. Other staff members moved efficiently around them, bringing equipment and medications without having to be asked. This was why they'd trained so extensively, to work as one when it mattered most. The baby's breathing gradually improved under their care. Color returned to the tiny cheeks. The mother's tears fell freely now, but they were tears of relief rather than fear. "I didn't think anyone would help us," she whispered. Danielle knelt beside her chair, taking her hand, just as she'd done countless times before, with other scared patients. In that moment, she was transported back to that gas station parking lot, to that split second when she'd had to choose between walking away or stepping forward. Looking into the mother's eyes, Danielle spoke the words that had changed her own life. "I won't let you die." She squeezed the woman's hand gently. "Either of you, you're safe now." The words carried the weight of promise, not just to this mother and child, but to everyone who would ever walk through the clinic's doors. It was a promise backed by state-of-the-art facilities, dedicated staff, and most importantly, unwavering compassion. Around them, the clinic continued its first-day rhythm. Through the open door, Danielle could hear Isaiah's voice cheerfully greeting new arrivals. The sound of hope and healing filled every corner of the building. Hope that had grown from a single act of kindness into something that would touch countless lives. The baby had fallen into peaceful sleep, breathing normally now. Soon they would admit the infant for observation, making sure the mother had a comfortable place to stay nearby. They would connect her with social services, arrange follow-up care, and make sure she left with everything needed to keep her child healthy. This was what Danielle had always dreamed of, not just treating symptoms, but healing whole lives. As she stood to check on other patients, she caught her reflection in a window. The woman who looked back at her wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was someone who had learned that when kindness seems to cost everything, it returns tenfold in unexpected ways. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.